but I wasn't totally sure. It was so crazy to me, and it was such an unimaginable idea that my own country and government would do this to me and my baby, that I came up with every other excuse in the book. I thought maybe it's fertilizers here, but the thing is it happened over in Medhow too. I mean, I thought maybe it's something we ate. No, it was nothing that we ate. I had no idea, and our feet started to curl and contort. I saw my son's body contorting. We had a kitten, and the cat would just like run through the house like crazy, and then the cat's skeletal development was eventually contorted and twisted so that it wasn't able to even grow to maturity of a cat without severe deformities after it had been living under the same conditions that my son and I were under. And a cat's skeletal formation is probably a lot easier to twist and contort and to be affected by that technology than mine and than that of my son. However, whatever damage was done to me was very, very bad for my son. And they did this to to a baby, and then to a toddler. He was walking before we moved to East Wenatchee, and we moved to East Wenatchee when he was 1 year old. He was walking at, I think, 9 months of age. And maybe earlier than 9 months of age. I remember he was walking early. He was running by the time we were in East Wenatchee. He would run down hills with me. I would hold his hand, and he wanted to pull me up a hill and run up the hill and then run down the hill, and he thought that was the most fun thing. So basically they, did something to twist his ability to speak, but he was still showing signs of advanced development by the things he was able to do and his physical development. He was in the top of his charts and everything. After they took my son from me, they made sure that my son's physical development was also affected. They tried to ruin my son's life. And in addition to this technology that caused all the twitching every single night and was only occurring at night, and in addition to this extreme, very horrific pelvic and lower back pain that I had, I found that the only way that pain would quit, for whatever reason, like for example, it was severe, and it was so severe that there is no possible way that sitting in a bathtub would have touched that level of pain. And it didn't matter if I sat in cold water or if I sat in warm water or whatever. If my body was immersed, for that particular form of technology, it somehow blocked the rays or the waves or whatever was used. Ultrasound was whatever was used to target that part of my body or that part that part of my body was absorbing most of that. It wasn't able to do it with a water barrier, with water blocking somehow that form of specific technology. It was so severe. I typically I have to shave my legs every single day, and I didn't have to shave my legs for 3 months because my hair was falling out. The hair wasn't growing on my body anymore, which was extremely abnormal, and I was having really weird, some weird passage of materials in the toilet too, sometimes. I was getting very tired because of the constant torture, and then I discovered my son was being tortured in other ways too. And my son was also targeted by a laser of some kind, because I found laser marks, burn marks on his body. I didn't smoke. He was never near a hot surface. He didn't touch anything hot. I didn't even have candles going in our house at that time. I mean, when I was single, I liked candles or having, ambiance, that kind of thing. We didn't have that. I sometimes had one or two, like up out of the way, but it wasn't really a big thing. He was never around him. There was nothing that would have caused a perfectly round, red burn mark on his body, under his diaper, and why would it be slightly under his diaper too? I mean, he always had a diaper on. So what would be able to go through a diaper? The only time he didn't have a diaper on was sometimes when he was outside with me. We were just by ourselves. A couple of times that was the case. But in general, he always had a diaper, and I remember the day that I saw he had a laser burn on his body, he'd been wearing a diaper the entire day. I hadn't been running around outside without one. And it was a perfectly round, red mark from U.S. military and the United States government. And at the time, it was George Bush in charge of the country, and Panetta was in charge. Leon Panetta was in charge of the CIA. And I believe it was Michael Hayden who was in charge of the armed forces at that time. That burn mark on his body, basically how if you have a sunburn, and then it's bright red at first, whatever part is burnt by the sun, and then after a couple of days, the surface skin begins to harden or whatever, toughen a little bit, and then it peels off. Okay, that's what happened with this mark. It was a perfectly round, it was about this size. I don't know if anybody can see that. It was about the size of my fingertip, the top front part of my fingertip. Maybe, actually, I guess about the size, I would say dime-sized, maybe slightly smaller than dime-sized, but about dime-sized. Perfectly round red mark on his body. Wasn't a rash. And it started to peel like a sunburn. He was burned. And then it began to peel like a sunburn. It wasn't like a burn. Even if you had a cigarette burn, it wouldn't peel like that, like a sunburn. It would most likely blister or scab or something horrible. But this was a peeling burn, like an ultraviolet kind of burn on my son's body. And I took him to the doctor for that, and the doctor was like very curious in an analytical way, and like, that's really weird. I've never seen anything like that before. I believe it was Dr. Crane. I believe it was the Dr. Crane at Central Washington Hospital who saw him for that and said it was very interesting. I've never seen anything like that. And don't worry about it. I'm sure it's nothing. He said it's not a rash. And he knew that I wasn't burning my own kid. And he said, oh, I wouldn't worry about it. I don't know what it is, but that's very interesting. My son was being tortured. It wasn't just me. They were torturing my son. I mean, targeting him with all these different things. And that wasn't the first time that happened to him. That was one of a few times that they did this to my son. I went to the doctors about my son's sudden inability to speak and articulate things as he had been able to before, and they said, "Oh, don't worry about it. Usually boys don't talk until they're 2." I said, "No, that's not the case. I mean, yes, I understand boys don't talk till they're 2 often, and it doesn't mean anything. I said, but my son was speaking already. He was already speaking very early, and then all of a sudden something happened, and then it affected his ability to be able to articulate the words. Like, oh, don't worry about it. Nobody paid attention to me and to my concerns because half of these doctors, they work for the government, they work for the military, they didn't want me to have a lawsuit against anybody that they knew, and they're criminals. Those doctors have committed crimes and have been covering up for horrible experimentation of human beings that this country has done to people since my mother has been living there, at least, since she was a little girl, because they used my mom for MK Ultra programs. And whatever they did to my grandpa and to my grandmother in order to be able to use her in that way, I have no idea. All I know is that suddenly this house that they were working on and building ended up not ever getting finished. So why didn't my grandpa finish it? It's not like he just got busy in the orchard. Something happened. And about the time that he quit working on it was about the time that my mother was being forced to be into an MK Ultra program for the United States government. So that whole area has generational crime. They've basically made it into a little cesspool of experiments and illegal deals. And now all of a sudden they've got a bunch of international people in that area, and I'm not sure why, aside from the fact that it might be interesting to some international people who want to be part of such a thing. Because they already have a reputation of, you know, if they're going to torture, I mean, what did they get there? Did Wenatchee get their official stamp and seal of approval from the CIA because they were all willing to go along with torture of me and my son, and they all didn't say a word? Police, judges, social service workers, church members, lawyers. FBI. So now, doctors, you know, so now that the CIA feels really comfortable with how people will keep their mouths shut, they decide to go ahead and give more money to the hospitals there and medical facilities there and reward people however they can to continue and keep up the crimes. And now international people want to be there, be part of it, because now that they've earned their stripes and stars of patriotism, is it patriotism to allow torture of United States citizens? And to basically bully and pick on one family and a couple of families for generations. So my son really never had a chance. And he doesn't have a chance, I don't believe, until somebody on an international level does get involved. And I would believe that would be in combination with somebody who is here in the United States that is not tied into the whole system in such a way that they refuse to help or cannot help. And, you know, honestly, they did these horrible things to my family, and they tried to make it international security matter when all it was hate crime. It wasn't national security to begin with. I was left alone until people got mad at me. So if I make people mad, then I get tortured. That doesn't sound like professional research to me. Because supposedly there is no partiality if you're just doing research, right? You don't care what the person's feelings, political beliefs, religious beliefs. You don't care about that. You're just doing your little research job. Well, they do care. People hated my guts. They wanted to kill me. They tried to kill me, and they tortured me. They ran me out of every possible viable way for me to make any money. They tried to shut me up. They didn't want me to be an activist or protesting in any way. They raped me repeatedly since 1998. They colluded to premeditate rape from Oregon State to Washington.